Hey, Hayden Gaming here. If you've ever played Valheim, even for just an hour or two, you'll have noticed that the world is full of abandoned structures, which come in a variety of sizes, various levels of stability, and many of which are infested with the enemies of the world. From stone houses overrun with grey dwarfs, watchtowers of the mountains and swamps teeming with undead draugrs, fallen Viking warriors from a forgotten time, to entire villages being overrun and controlled by these now condemned but once mighty Vikings. But, amongst all the danger within the world, the meadows biome is smattered with hamlets and settlements lost to the annals of time, which still hold hope and promise for life to return to the harsh world of Valheim. And so, meet our protagonist for this adventure, Bjorn the Viking, banished to the 10th world known as Valheim, with the challenge of restoring a village within 10 days. Time is of the essence of this challenge, and so we immediately got to gathering some stone and wood, mapping the location for Eikthyr, the first Forsaken, as well as foraging nearby berries and mushrooms to bolster our health and stamina attributes. We grabbed some more berries from several nearby bushes and went about torching some saplings for easy access to wood. Picking up a few more stone nearby, we went about crafting a stone axe to defend ourselves and a hammer in anticipation of building, once we had found a village at least. Making use of the coast whilst nearby, we quickly gathered up many pieces of flint due to the large requirement of the early game recipes. We then ran into a couple of grazing boar nearby, which we axed down to give us access to leather scraps and meat, and then used the coast to head northeast, slightly towards the location for Eikthyr, but to carry on gathering flint and hunting any boar we crossed along the way. As the island continued to open up further east and towards the south, we turned back north to close in on Eikthyr's location, and to not get lost roaming the large open meadows biome before us, foraging and hunting several more boar as we went. After a short while, we stumbled across a sturdy looking house with a chest of some basic loot, before passing Eikthyrs location. We were then drawn north by a bunch of mushrooms, and so naturally drifted this way through the woods, across a meadow, before being met by the edge of the Black Forest. And then we saw it. We'd already stumbled across an abandoned village. Working through the broken dwellings, we looted the minimal amount of resources from the chests within, broke down a beehive to get access to honey and our first queen bee, before making a basic flint spear, a perfect beginner's hunting weapon which could be thrusted or javelined at enemies. We had quickly explored the small settlement and could see what exactly this village used to consist of. 4 dwellings, comprising of 2 small huts on the southern side and 2 medium huts on the north, sat surrounded by several old farm boundaries which had now nothing more than mud patches where crops once flourished. Boar and greylings now roamed the area unchallenged, as nature had begun to reclaim the man-made structures here. Unbeknown to us, the Black Forest loomed not too far away, which would come to benefit us, providing nearby resources and crypts for exploring. But for now, the extensive amount of nearby wood was the most attractive point of this location, which would be invaluable providing lumber for building and wood crafting. And so we began tearing down nearby saplings for wood, being interrupted by some grey dwarfs who had wandered from the Black Forest due to the sounds of chopping. After dispatching of these creatures of the forest, we returned to our crafting table, which we had placed in one of the larger houses, crafted a shield with the small amount of leather scraps we had gathered so far, and then placed our first beehive in a small fenced area nearby. We then began felling trees for larger quantities of wood, gathered up some nearby loose stones, and headed back to the village to place down a campfire, a chopping block upgrade for our workbench, and upgraded our shield to level 2. After some further wood chopping, we explored east where the border of the Black Forest kept extending towards, and stumbled across a second beehive within an abandoned dwelling. Sunset of day 1 had quickly rolled in, so we headed south into more of the safer meadows biome, hunting and foraging along the way, before finding the southern coast of the island, meaning we could again top up our flint. Some more exploring later, we found another beehive, giving us our third queen bee so far, before returning to flint collection at the coast, while hunting any animals we came across, and then heading back north, inland, to uncover more of the hidden map and slowly work our way towards home. We stumbled on a nearby burial grave, giving us access to bone fragments, and also scouted an exposed burial chamber at the edge of the nearby Black Forest, which we noted on our map for later. Dawn was almost upon us as we found ourselves back at the settlement, quickly placing down more beehives for extra honey production, and then heading back to our crafting table to produce some leather armour, a crude bow, some fire arrows, and crafting several upgrades to our equipment. Much of the start of day 2 was then spent chopping down wood and fighting off intrusive grey dwarfs, before relocating our campfire within our chosen dwelling in the settlement, storing some of our less critical items, and by the afternoon we had hunted our way over to the summoning location for Eikthyr, the mighty stag, ready to defeat the first Forsaken of Valheim. As usual, the fight went without a hitch, as I kept my distance and unleashed fire and flint arrows alike into the thick hide of Eikthyr, eventually bringing down the mythical beast to retrieve its antlers, which we can use to craft pickaxes, and its trophy, which we quickly brought to the sacrificial stones not too far away to unlock its stamina boosting ability. Back home, we had used more of our deer hides to continue crafting leather armour, and began cooking deer meat to provide a more health boosting food, something we'd certainly need to allow us to venture into the Black Forest. We also placed another storage box, a deer rug for better comfort buff, and crafted a bed to spawn at, though we'd clumsily forgotten to activate it as our spawn point. After chopping a couple of trees for wood, we crafted 2 antler pickaxes and sprinted through the nearby Black Forest, armed with our spear and shield, ready to fight foes, uncover ore veins, and delve into the burial chambers in search of treasures. We were quickly stopped in our tracks by a nearby copper vein, which we began unearthing and pickaxing to extract the copper we would need to enter the Bronze Age. As night crept in, we headed home to store the copper and some of our other loot, before heading out to use the night to explore further into the Black Forest, risking attacks from groups of grey dwarfs, but ensuring we were maximising our time. After all, 10 days in the game wouldn't last long at all. We found more copper veins, plucked thistle, picked blueberries, tasseled with skeletons in forgotten stone watchtowers, and found the edge of a nearby mountain biome, before stumbling across a nearby burial chamber which we were eager to explore. Wandering through its narrow corridors, which teemed with skeletons, we quickly found ourselves overwhelmed, as we hadn't returned home to rest, and so making use of a separate room, we rested and isolated each skeleton, picking them off one by one, before pressing on with our exploration, raiding chests of loot, gathering up yellow mushrooms, destroying bone piles which spawned skeletons, and picking up the few treasures we came across, before resurfacing back into the daylight of day 3. We rested up after arriving back at the settlement, then got busy chopping plenty of wood before dismantling the existing main dwelling which we had begun to inhabit. We planned to expand its footprint and general size to allow more adequate storage and expandability for early to mid-game requirements. With most of the construction done on the main dwelling of the settlement, our attention moved to the second larger house, which we got to dismantling and then flattening the exposed ground. My plan for this space would be an open plan blacksmith, which would take shape as a circular building with a large opening to the front, and a space for a central campfire for both illumination and to add to the aesthetic of the blacksmith, almost acting like a forge. Midway through construction, we were interrupted by a large scouting party from the nearby Black Forest, comprising of several grey dwarfs, a brute, and a couple of shaman. These didn't pose much of a threat, and the brute even ended up fleeing from the fight, scared off by the furious lancing of our spear and the swift shooting of our bow, which quickly brought down its several kin. Day 4 kicked off with us felling many surrounding trees to replenish our wood supplies, before constructing a basic fence for our beehive area, offering at least some inconvenience for any wandering greylings or grey dwarfs. The settlement was very quickly shaping up, and so, to keep up our momentum, we began dismantling one of the smaller dwellings, flattening out the land it once stood on to make space for a small boar farm, complete with a uniform, sturdy wooden fence and small shelter. We then constructed a small farmer's hut adjacent to the boar farm, big enough to house a small family, but nothing overly luxurious. The dwelling largely took the shape of a typical Viking-style, triangular cross-section structure you can expect to find throughout the world of Valheim, but with the addition of a designated chimney and windows to open up the somewhat cramped space. After some further wood gathering, my attention returned back to the main dwelling, where I added in some beams to the open-ended roof style, acting as an aesthetic support for the roof panels. Not a necessary addition by any means, but a nice touch to add a bit of realism to the build. With the main dwelling pretty much finished structure-wise, I went off in search of boars, luring one which I found handily nearby into my newly created pen, which went very smoothly. Allowing the creature to become acquainted to the space, I headed off into the Black Forest as night began to roll in for day 4, delving into a closer burial chamber than we previously explored. After a tussle with some skeletons, we quickly came to realise that this chamber was packed with skeleton warriors, much like the previous one, with more and more challenging groups behind each door and down each hallway that I explored, before I had no choice but to escape into the cold night air to briefly compose myself. Heading back into the chamber for a fight, a group of skeletons were proactively waiting for me, and foolishly I dove into the fight, finishing off 3 of the sword-wielding skeletons before falling to the arrow of a ranged skeleton after I misjudged a parry. It was at this moment we realised we'd not set our spawn point at camp, and so, keen to not let this setback hurt us too much as we neared the halfway point of the challenge 10-day limit, we rushed back home, consuming a berry and mushroom for sustenance which we picked on the way. Back at our dwelling, we cooked up a piece of deer meat for improved health and stamina, rested up, and then headed back to the burial chamber where our loot sat waiting for us in the moonlit entrance hall. Sneaking in, we retrieved our very full inventory and immediately equipped our armour and weaponry before heading home as the sun rose on day 5. Our settlement foundations still had a way to go, but we'd also need to slightly improve our equipment before braving the burial chambers again, and so the remainder of the morning was spent foraging food and flint, as well as hunting in the peaceful meadows to gather hides and meats from roaming deer and boar. After half a day of hunting, we ended up at another abandoned settlement, which quickly refocused our attention to the task at hand, and soon after we were back at home, upgrading our workbench with a drying rack to allow further equipment upgrades, which we did through making a cape and upgrading our helmet and spear. Our attention then returned to some building, whereby I intended to finish the small farmer's hut with the final touches, but quickly got interrupted by a raid from the Black Forest. After a short but arduous battle, nighttime had fallen, and with peace returning to the settlement, we gathered up the dropped loot from the raid and began felling more trees for building materials, allowing us to finish the hut. We then cleared a space by dismantling the last remaining original structure of the settlement, flattened out the ground, and began constructing a small old age temple-like structure, which we would use as a portal house. As morning of day 6 rolled in, we began by doing several odd jobs that kicked off with felling trees for wood, placing down a final beehive, slightly resizing the farmer's hut, and then finishing off the flooring within our main dwelling, before finally getting our bed down and setting a spawn point. We then made further upgrades to our leather armour, before heading off into the nearby burial chamber to bring the fight to the hordes of skeletons within. Now we were more prepared for combat. After several skirmishes within the shadows of the winding chambers, we finally found some surtling cores among the many treasures, an item required for smelting, before continuing the onslaught of skeletons to clear the chamber fully of these ancient warriors. Hungry for more treasures and combat alike, we delved into another chamber close by, where we again encountered plenty of enemies and surtling cores for the taking. With 10 surtling cores now in hand, we had enough to construct both a charcoal kiln and smelter, and so we resurfaced into the night and headed home, finding a good spot near our blacksmith to place down our new smelting stations. After some wood shopping, we loaded up our kiln to generate coal, and then headed off as morning of day 7 began to explore further east and mine some tin off the coastline of the Black Forest. En route home by the middle of the day, we enticed a boar back and managed to trap it within our farm alongside the existing boar. It was now just a waiting game, and a matter of keeping out of their way to ensure they would become tamed. We continued our metallurgy, and with our newly acquired copper, we placed down the forge crafting table within our blacksmith area. bolstering our wood supplies with more tree felling, and continuing our smelting through the night, we then put our focus into building a basic watchtower on the tallest hill within the settlement, looking directly toward the nearby Black Forest, from where several attacks have been launched against us thus far, including a full-on raid. We then spent some time starting off a ditch to surround the settlement, providing superior defence against ground foes in between smelting, adding a cauldron to the main dwelling for improved recipes like boar jerky, and then unlocking bronze equipment as day 8 kicked off. Happily mining in the morning sun, we were interrupted by a troll who had heard the clanging on rock, and after being struck by a heavy blow from its tree trunk club, as we were stubborn enough to keep on mining, the troll becomes stuck in the ore vein, leaving it vulnerable to our ranged attacks once we had dealt with the annoying grey dwarf who had accompanied for a fight. Finishing up our copper mining, we were soon back at base, smelting, and then putting the troll hide to use in making some better troll leather armour. The day then swiftly continued, with some more trench digging around the settlement, a small exploration to the north where we found a handful more carrot seeds, and then, with our acquired bronze ingots, we crafted a bronze axe. After repositioning our kiln and smelter slightly more out of the way so as to not interrupt getting around the settlement, we felled some birch trees for firewood using our new bronze axe, and then went about making a small farm plot to utilise our carrot seeds. Day 9 was quickly upon us, and with the fine wood gathered in quantity, and with more copper smelting, we placed down a chair by the fire, and a dragon ornament to adorn the front of our dwelling. Alongside our fine wood gathering, we could now also gather corewood from pine trees in the Black Forest, a necessity for crafting a cultivator to farm with. As night time of day 9 rolled in, we lit up our blacksmith with a central campfire, finished up the farm we'd began earlier that day, and used our newly made cultivator to plant some carrot seeds. The rest of the night was then spent digging our trench further, and just like that, day 10 was upon us. Our last day of building, digging, and furnishing had quickly arrived. And so, our day consisted of making a cover for our blacksmith campfire, furnishing our watchtower to make our night patrols a bit more comfortable to endure, and digging out the remainder of our trench, which we'd finally complete, though we chose to add in a small aesthetic bridge to allow access to the settlement. As a matter of basic protection, we also placed some sharp stakes to tangle up and attack grey dwarfs who dared stray nearby. The day was quickly rolling by, and after some paving around the settlement for better access between buildings, a minor upgrade for our blacksmith forge, some erecting of basic fences outside the dwellings, some tactical torch placements, and a last-minute crafting table addition to our blacksmith area, we saw in the end of our 10th day by guarding the edge of our settlement from our basic but effective watchtower. As the rain subsided, the simple settlement which we had rebuilt over the last 10 days shone within the quiet meadows of Valheim, standing as a beacon of hope that those condemned to this world can not just survive, but thrive, even under constant threat from the dark forces of the world who eternally lay waiting in the shadows. Thanks for watching and sticking through to the end of the video. Be sure to like the video if you'd like to support me further, subscribe for more Valheim content, and be sure to check out my other videos too. I upload everything from build tutorials and challenges like this video, to playthrough series and tips and tricks. Until next time.